All right, just to confirm that we're on YouTube now, so that all seems to be working well.
All right. Thank you, Ben. It's good to be here. We've hit 2 o'clock now. Ben, were you expecting anybody from the Wicker end to arrive who hasn't?
I think it's just myself and Edwin. I think I heard Edwin earlier. I think yes, I can see Edwin. So yeah, I think it's just us 2 for now.
I think, what is it, Tom Gifford's going to be joining us for the presentation, isn't he? Because he's got the slides to present on those, Ben.
Okay, that's the last item. So I'll give Tom I'll get in touch with Tom now, and hopefully he'll join us for that.
Would you give Tom a prod? Because I would rather that we did that item nearer the start.
Okay, no worries. Yes, I'll get in touch with him now.
Thank you. On that basis, I'll give it a minute because I see that we've still got people joining us. So just while we deal with that, because I'm presuming most councillors have come for the workshop item. So if we deal with that first, then some of them who may need to leave to deal with other matters can do so.
Councillor Sutherland, it looks like that Tom Gifford has joined the call now.
Well, thank you. Well, you'll have a few minutes to settle in anyway. Hi, Tom. You all right?
Yeah, good to see you again, Councillor.
I was just saying that we're going to move you up the agenda, but we'll still deal with the open forum first. But we will take you at the front end. Thanks, Tom.
So John Neal from Calderdale Council here. Actually, just my name's come out wrong. It should have had my name instead of RD23. So just making that clear.
To get on the bus though. Massive
Yeah,
fan of that.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't miss the commute.
Getting some feedback from someone. So I'll start by saying welcome to everybody who's attending today's district consultation subcommittee. We're very well attended today with the addition of a number of councillors who've come due to their interest in the item on their agenda. So welcome to all of you who've come, and our recurring members and operators and team from Wicker who have served this committee for a long time. It is amazing how the move to Zoom does sometimes allow a lot more people to attend a meeting, and as much as I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in person, it's definitely really a benefit in terms of being able to spread the reach of some of our work here, and to the millions of viewers at home on YouTube too. So I'll take us through the agenda now. First thing we've got is open forum, and I've had a request from Anthony Ray to ask a question. So I'm not aware of any other questions, so I'll invite Anthony.
Thank you, Chair. And I've got 2 questions, but I'll leave that to you as to whether both can be taken. The first one concerns Calderdale, and the second one, by the way, relates to the connectivity infrastructure item which you've got on as item 9. I think you'll recall, Councillor Sutherland, because I think you were on the Calderdale Climate Emergency Committee meeting, I think it was last week, that I was asking a question about the carbon audit that has been agreed by Wicker to be undertaken across all its transport schemes, and that's been making its way through the system. But sorry, I should say, by the way, Anthony Ray, representing Calderdale Friends of the Earth. Sorry, should have made that clearer. We were concerned that there was an apparent exclusion of schemes that were corridor improvement schemes that were advancing through the business case stages, that they might be excluded from the carbon audit. And at the Green Economy panel recently, it was clarified as to those, only those schemes which were contractually let would be excluded from the carbon audit. And you can appreciate the significance and the concern about this in view of the scale of the carbon reductions that are going to be required over the next decade, certainly more than 50% at the West Yorkshire level. So the question that I want to ask is, I suppose, a repeat of the question I put to the climate change working party, the Calderdale one, which was, I think we can understand that A629 corridor improvement programme, I think it's called stage 1. I think it's stage 1 and 1A and B. Those contracts have been let. Although looking at A629, I think it's called stage 2. It's mentioned in your papers. It's implying that there's a full business case going to be submitted in August. So you can see the significance of the importance of that date as to whether it's going to be included within the carbon audit or not. But then, of course, there are many other corridor improvement programs across Calderdale. And what would be really helpful is if Wicked could be clear, also not expecting an answer now, as to that the majority of the Calderdale corridor improvement programs are going to be, if you like, caught by or considered by the carbon audit that Wicked is undertaking, because of course these are really significant infrastructure issues for Calderdale, and there's a strong cross dependency across to the local plan. So I'd be grateful to hear either your or somebody's views, that it'd be really helpful for Calderdale and the decisions it's taking as to which corridor improvement programs are going to be included in the Wicked carbon audit. So that's my first question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anthony. Do any of the officers want to pick up or can comment on the specifics of what was asked there? And if we can't do immediately, can we look to arrange a written response for Mr. Ray? But if anybody wants to chip in, please feel free.
Councillor, I don't know the response off the top of my head, but I've gone back into the organisation as the question was raised, and maybe later in the meeting or afterwards I'll be able to come back with a response. I'm not sure if any other combined authority officers. Edwin, is there anything you want to pick up now on it?
No, thanks, Tom. If you're going to take that back, because it's not really our area of expertise on our side, if you could take that back from a policy perspective and delivery perspective, that would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you. I would say that within the Transport Committee, and this was recognised on a cross-party basis, that there is going to be some challenge and that there is going to be some stresses in the system as we have to start re-evaluating schemes that have had a lot of time invested in them. But I think the committee across the board recognised that it was the right thing to do and that we should pursue it. So I will make sure you get a detailed response at some point. Anthony, did you have another question that you might be able to briefly ask, please?
Yes, I will do. And obviously, I'll be pleased to see the answer. But as I said, I think it's going to be really important for Calderdale councillors and officers to understand that those schemes are going to be submitted to the carbon audit. Don't know what the outcome is. The second one, and I'll be as brief as possible, but it sort of, as I said, it relates to the connectivity infrastructure item that your committee is going to be considering, and I wanted to ask for clarification as to whether those proposals coming forward, because as you know there are a whole series of reports listed in that item, whether they have been tested to be consistent with the carbon reduction pathway that has been identified by the carbon emissions reduction pathway report produced by Element Energy in July, or accepted by the authority in July of last year, because clearly it's absolutely critical. The first test to apply to this strategy that you're going to be talking about later is it going to be supportive of and delivering that carbon reduction pathway, which, as we know, even the maximum ambition scenario didn't do enough. Is it going to, are all these infrastructure plans and all the money that's going to be spent on them, is it going to be delivering on that pathway, or is it somehow proceeding in parallel but not related to it? So it'd be really helpful, and maybe it can be dealt with in the item itself. Really helpful for clarity on that, because I can't immediately see that they are clearly identified as delivering on the carbon reductions that are required. I'm also unclear, by the way, as to the closing date of the current consultation. So maybe that could be cleared up as well. Thank you very much.
Please do, Tom.
Councillor Sutherland, just to say that I think I'll cover that as part of the presentation, and that will come out. I think it's a really fair question. Let me come back to that through the presentation when we get onto that item on the agenda today.
Okay, thank you. I'll get us through the other pieces of the agenda so we can get to that. But were there any apologies for absence?
Councillor Peter Caffrey has sent his apologies.
Yes, okay. Declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests. I don't believe we have any that are relevant. Exempt information. There's no exempt information. Minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of October. People, have our regular members had a chance to have a look through these, and are they happy that they're an accurate record of the discussion? Is there anything that anybody wants to raise? No. Well, without the sight of any objections, I'll consider those carried. And that was the last, I think that's the last thing we need to deal with really before we could get onto the presentation. So I think Tom may be taking over our screens and providing us with some slides and as a presentation for us. So I'll be happy to pass over to Tom, and hopefully we'll be able to take some questions at the end.
Chair, it's Brandon Jones from First Bus. There was just one action from us, if I may just very quickly answer that one. That was from the minutes.
Oh, please do, thank you.
Yeah, the minutes refer to the service 549 and the service levels there. I think particularly with regard to the Huddersfield end, which is hourly. That is based on the passenger levels, certainly that we've been recording. We believe that those levels right now are the right level for that end of the 549. We are monitoring it and we continue to do so. So at the moment, we're not seeing any capacity issues, but we'll continue to monitor and we'll make changes as necessary. But that's ultimately what the answer is to that particular query. I hope that answers that one for now.
Thank you, Brendan. John, I'll bring you in. I couldn't remember who had asked the question originally, so go ahead.
I asked the question originally. Thank you, Brandon. Well, it answers it in as much as it gives your answer. Obviously, at the moment, as with almost all the services, numbers are down. So that's a bit by the way at the moment, isn't it? Before it was cut, though, I was amazed because it always seemed to be so busy that, and at peak times, there definitely be people standing. And I couldn't understand how it came to be cut back. I do know that, of course, some of the people who used it have in the meantime found other ways of getting to and from their school, work or whatever in Huddersfield. So even if the service came back to being out twice an hour now, it would take a little while to build up again. And I would hope that in due course that would be possible.
Thank you for that observation, and we'll certainly monitor it very closely. As you suggest there, we are all working closely as part of the alliance and with the local authority through the recovery process, and clearly we all have the objective to encourage as many people back to buses as possible when we can, because clearly that's going to be a very strong advantage for the local economy and for our road network to flow smoothly and avoid it clogging up with cars. So we'll continue to monitor that closely, Mr. Shepherd. Thank you.
Thank you, Brennan. Thank you for picking that up and not letting that slip past us. Tom, I will pass over to you then at this stage, and I'm going to mute myself as well so you can have the floor.
Hello, and good afternoon. It's good to meet you all today on the call. My name is Tom Gifford, and I work for West Yorkshire Combined Authority in the Transport Policy section. And I oversee much of the development of the West Yorkshire Connectivity Plan, and in particular the mass transit proposals as well. So it's good to see you all today. And I've got a number of slides to talk you through around the connectivity plan, try and set the scene about where we've got to with it so far, the next steps, and really how you guys can get involved in it. And that's the key message from today's conversation, is we really need your feedback on the plan. It doesn't have to be today. It can be all the way through to the 11th of April when the engagement concludes, and it can be any form, and from emails through to responding to the interactive map on the website to completing the survey form. The key thing we really need is your feedback and your thoughts on the plan and where we've got to with it. And today's a really good opportunity to share and discuss the plan and its current stage of development. I'm supported by Rebecca Chung, who I'm hoping is on the call as well. She's coming from the rail perspective, and we'll be able to hopefully answer any questions from the rail perspective as well. If there's Ben Kearns, if Rebecca's not on the call, would you mind just messengering her in Teams to make sure she's got the link to the Zoom call to make sure she can dial in?
Will do.
Thank you. So
I'm here.
Oh, you're here, Fab. Thank you. Rebecca, before we get any further, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm Rebecca Chung. I work in the rail team, West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Nice
Fantastic.
to meet you.
So if there's any particular rail questions as we're going through, do shout. And in terms of how to comment as we're going through, feel free to use the chat function. As we're going through, if there's a particular issue you kind of pick up as we're talking through, I'll try and address it as we go through, but I might pick it up at the end, depending on what I see versus what I'm looking at on the screen at the same time. But we'll definitely have time at the end for Q&A, and more than happy to take comments away. And if there are particular issues you guys want to delve into, then we're more than happy also to have a follow-up one-to-one to talk through any particular issues and insights. But in terms of intro, that's the main thing I just wanted to start with. And the final thing to say before we get going is that the slides from today will be up on the website straight after the session. So if you particularly want the slides to look through them at your own leisure, they'll be on the website, as well as today's call that is being recorded and will be put on YouTube and a link on our website. So again, if there's anyone missing today who particularly wanted to come here but couldn't make it, the call will be recorded and it'll be available on YouTube for prosperity. So moving into the material. So can I just check, can someone, Dan, could you just shout to say you can see the slides? Thank you. Okay, so the plan for today is to give you a bit of an update on the connectivity plan, what it means for Calderdale, where we are with the mass transit work as well, and next steps. And as I said, this is a really important opportunity for everyone to kind of share their views on the plans and the status they're in at the moment. So one slide on stats. Where is West Yorkshire? I'm sure we're all aware of this. So it's made up of the 5 West Yorkshire districts: Leeds, Bradford, Calderdale, Kirklees, Wakefield. West Yorkshire is a really significant economy to UK PLC with £55 billion, bigger than a number of EU countries with 2.3 million people living within it. So it's a big deal, West Yorkshire. It's got a number of significant universities, the largest regional finance centres, as well as
not bad.
Significant.
Adam.
Could I ask who anyone?
Oh,
Adam. Mute to put themselves on mute. Thank you. and makes it a bit easier so everyone else can hear us as we're going through. So what does the combined authority do? Well, obviously we do an awful lot around transport through the Metro brand, but we do a lot more than that. We also do a lot of work around the adult education budgets and skills spaces, a lot of work around business growth hubs, employment hubs, enterprise advisors and the like, as well as being the accountable body for the LEP, and developing and delivering a range of projects, not just transport projects, but in other spaces as well, and working in partnership with partner councils as well across West Yorkshire. So the combined authority has a broad role, and that's likely to kind of expand as the mayor comes into post from May this year. And obviously devolution changes the discussion and changes the levers, conversations and funding available to West Yorkshire, which has hopefully allow us to have more control over our destiny, but also allow us to deliver some of those schemes which are really important to us as a region. But today I'm really here to talk about the West Yorkshire Connectivity Plan and the Mass Transit Vision and the complementary documentation we've published. And as you'll be aware, in January we published the very first West Yorkshire Connectivity Infrastructure Plan, and that's kind of complemented by a series of daughter documents across each of the modes. So there's a vision document for the rail, a bus network review piece, and we'll come back to each one of these as we're going through. A piece on local walking and cycling infrastructure, a new West Yorkshire Mass Transit Vision 2040 document, future mobility strategy, and it's all supported by a series of evidence documents set out as case for change reports. The engagement's running until the 27th, well, from the 27th of January through to the 11th of April. And the plan is really focused on public good, people and prosperity, and it's grounded in evidence. So it's built up from local plans, it's built up from the environmental constraints, it's built up from housing, employment sites, transport constraints across the region, and it's the start of the process, not the end. So it really is setting the framework for future schemes to come forward in the context of the big challenges facing our region. And that's what the purpose of this engagement is about. Have we identified the right challenges? Have we identified the right kind of framework for the future? And it is a really bold investment proposition, and it is ambitious. And is a step change from what we've done before. And it's the first time we've had a spatial plan in this way for transport as a region. So it will evolve post the engagement, and it will continue to evolve in the coming years as well. So please don't treat this as the end of the process. This is very much the beginning. And the plan's built up from the three big challenges facing our region as of today. The challenges around COVID and our recovery from it. What does that mean for future travel patterns? What does that mean for the economy? What does that mean for our towns and city centres? The need to connect everyone, and really that focus on inclusive growth and kind of connecting those areas in most need of economic support. And also finally, the climate emergency and the net zero carbon 2038 target we have set ourselves as a region. And our proposition is that all three of these big challenges facing our region are interlinked and must be tackled concurrently. They must be done at the same time. We can't just focus on COVID. We need to focus on all of these challenges if we're to help our region to flourish and to grow. So I mentioned earlier about the plan being built up from evidence. And this is one of the first of a few maps which I'm going to bring up onto the screen today. And it's worthwhile saying all the material I'm sharing today is available on the website. So I'm just summarising the material which is currently on the website. This is a really important plan. This is the first time as a region we have stitched together all of those growth centres across the region in terms of housing growth, employment growth sites from the local plans as they stand at the moment, noting that they are evolutionary documents as well. As well as highlighting those key areas supporting deprivation. And so this is the first time we'll have brought all this material together into a single place. And this is a summary of it. There's more detail available in the documentation. And why is this important? Well, if you're to design a transport system, understanding the function of places now and into the future is incredibly important. It is right at the heart of this work, understanding the function of places to make sure we've got the right transport system moving forward for a region. And this is a zoom in from a Calderdale perspective. This is again is in the plan. It kind of highlights those key growth areas. It highlights the environmental resilience SPA areas, the broader spatial priority areas, as well as those areas experiencing deprivation and the most in need of inclusive growth. So it sets out that broad picture, not just of Calderdale, but how that then kind of feeds into the broader Bradford and Kirklees areas of West Yorkshire. And there are plans in the rest of the documentation which go into that in more detail. And the plan is focused on 6 priorities. So the first of those priorities is around walking and cycling becoming the first choice for shorter journeys. And then bus being at the heart of the plans, with networks revitalised post-COVID, rail continuing to serve the trips, particularly to the main centres, a new form of mass transit providing the missing link in our transport system. Cars and vans still being important, but just being used less. And that really talks to the climate emergency piece and the net carbon zero target. And just pausing on that for a moment, you'll be aware that we've done a major piece of work looking at carbon emissions across different sectors within West Yorkshire. And what that work has done is highlight that transport is the biggest emitting sector of carbon emissions in West Yorkshire. And within that, the private car is the biggest emitting mode of transport of carbon emissions in West Yorkshire. So if you really want to address carbon emissions from a transport perspective, you have to address the car trips. And obviously, the move to electric vehicles is going to help in that space, but our assumptions and the evidence suggest that won't be enough on its own. And the purpose of this plan is to help provide that quality, sustainable alternative to the car, so that people are able to make their journeys by public and sustainable transport modes and have that realistic alternative to the car. However, having noted that, cars and vans will continue to be important, but we just need them to be used less. And the plan also identifies some of the wider measures which might need to be taken moving forwards. The plan also has a focus on international connectivity, particularly in a post-Brexit world. So moving on. So just a moment on regional priorities, and we can come on back to this towards the end, because I'm sure there'll be questions, particularly on the rail space. But the plan identifies a series of intercity priorities to connect West Yorkshire in the north and to the UK. So obviously key routes for investment include the Trans-Pennine Route Upgrade Programme, making sure that happens in full, investment in the East Coast Main Line, the electrification of the Calder Valley route, as well as the new lines for HS2 to Leeds and Northern Powerhouse Rail serving Bradford and Leeds centres. So the plan identifies those priorities and they're illustrated in the map. We're waiting on the integrated rail plan, and you've probably seen in the press that that's been delayed by central government, and that will be a really important document to set out how these major pan-northern programmes will come forward. We can come back to that again if we need to. But coming back to within West Yorkshire, the key aspect of the plans is this map, and then the kind of what these maps mean. So this map then highlights the key places to connect, and how we're learning from all of the evidence around the key growth areas, the key communities within West Yorkshire, the key kind of employment areas, transport constraints, how it all starts, how it stitches together across the various modes. This isn't to say that this is definitive. This is an engagement. We're asking for people's views on this, but this is the first time as a region we've kind of brought it together in terms of, if we're to help deliver our ambitions as a region, what do we need? What's the overall vision for the region in terms of connectivity, and how do we want to connect places? And so here in this map, for the first time, we identify the areas where there's the opportunity for mass transit, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. the long distance rail routes, the local rail routes, the key strategic bus routes, and walking and cycling infrastructure in one plan overall. And this sets that framework. And this is really important for when we're then bidding for money moving forward to government. So when there's an individual scheme, say for Halifax or for Hepton Bridge, we can then set it in the context of the broader connectivity plan for the region. So it's not just there on its own, it's actually part of a bigger plan of what we want to achieve with the transport system for West Yorkshire. So we've talked a little bit about the connectivity plan. And what I'll do now is just turn to the mass transit document to talk you through that, and then move into some of the other modes. And then beyond that, we'll get into what it means for Calderdale, and then open it up to questions. So turning to mass transit, we've published the West Yorkshire Mass Transit Vision 2040. The document sets out a bold ambition to make West Yorkshire greener, more inclusive and better connected. The vision document's on the website, and we really want your feedback on it. The case for mass transit focuses on how a low carbon system can support the recovery from COVID, support the transition to net zero carbon economy, provide seamless integration between the modes, and support communities across the region. Mass transit linked to cycling and walking, bus and rail is integral to our vision for a sustainable public transport system fit for the 21st century. The vision document illustrates the corridors within West Yorkshire where the evidence suggests there is the greatest potential case for mass transit to be delivered. This map is the first time as a region we've illustrated that integration between the various modes of transport and the role which mass transit will play in filling the key gaps in our transport system. As part of the engagement, which is open, we're asking you, have we identified the right places to connect by mass transit? Do you agree with the vision? Do you think we should do it differently? And this again is from the mass transit vision document, but it's useful for today's conversation. It's just that zoom in of what it means more locally to Calderdale. You can see there obviously Halifax, Elland, as well as the communities to the north of Halifax, around Ovenden, Illingworth, etc. And you can see there the tube map is in the public domain, as well as the more detailed kind of the summary map. It's all there. There's more information within the mass transit vision to explain how mass transit can integrate with the broader public transport offer and can help to connect those communities across the Calder Valley. But what do we mean by mass transit? Well, the case for mass transit will build on a worldwide market testing into transit technologies, which we held last year, where we spoke to around 120 suppliers, manufacturers and operators of mass transit systems from the UK, Europe, China and beyond. It highlights the need for a blend of advanced innovative technologies, such as new bus rapid transit technologies, new light rail technologies, which will allow us to leapfrog other regions, but still be grounded in deliverable options. And this page of the vision document highlights those different technologies, from advanced rapid bus to light rail, tram train and ultralight rail, and different technologies kind of cater for different numbers of people. So on some corridors, we're not going to need to have a light rail system because the level of demand won't mean that there's sufficient number of people wanting to use it. Therefore, a bus type of solution might be better because it can carry lower people and has a lower cost. Whereas on other corridors, an ultralight rail solution might be the right solution. It might be a lower capacity, but still run on a steel rail. And there's interesting innovations happening in that space, particularly around Coventry at the moment. So it's not about saying it's a binary choice between any one of these modes. It's about the blend of these modes to reflect the local needs, the local demand, and the ambitions of the region. And that's really part of the engagement on the mass transit visions. Do you agree that these are the right types of technologies we should be looking at for West Yorkshire? Because this is the first time as a region we've come together with a plan setting out what the opportunity for mass transit is across the region, and it's a real step change from where we've been before. But before we design anything, it's really important that we reflect on what it is we want to achieve through the design of mass transit, regardless of the mode. And in effect, this page here sets out that 4 design principles. And mass transit will be a new form of transport to West Yorkshire. Will be a new form of transport for West Yorkshire, and it needs to be integrated into the urban fabric of every community it serves. Our design principles are shaped by our goal to create a 21st century transport system. And we've proposed 4 principles for designing the mass transit system. I'll just run through those quickly. So the first one is around putting people first, our shared environmental responsibility, creating a better connected region, and also celebrating the cultural and historic assets of West Yorkshire. And that blend of these design principles is absolutely essential from just picking out a few points out from these, the accessibility and the step-free access onto the vehicles, to having an attractive alternative to the car and infrastructure which is resilient to climate change. But from a better connected perspective, that integration with local bus services, so bus and mass transit sharing infrastructure where needed and practical, to avoid competition. And the same with rail. So in effect, your mass transit and rail integrate at particular key hub locations, and cycleways complementing mass transit rather than kind of being a binary evil choice. And the same goes with celebrating West Yorkshire. This is all about creating a natural and built environment which enhances our urban spaces and supports regeneration. So some really big ambitions in this space. And again, this is what we want your views on. Are these the right principles for designing a mass transit system? Having a deliverable scheme for phase 1 is absolutely essential, and obviously there's been lessons in this space in West Yorkshire in the last 20 or so years, and there's also a kind of a need to accelerate delivery and to enable the levelling up of the north. The vision document sets out a roadmap for next steps and also the implications from devolution and also the recent budget. You might be aware that as part of the budget, there was the announcement of a £4.2 billion intra-city transport fund settlement for mayoral areas. So West Yorkshire, as is moving towards a mayoral combined authority, is able to access that fund, and it's specifically designed for mass transit types of schemes to come forward across those mayoral areas. So that's really important for us, but we're able to put in a really strong case to central government to help fund the first phase of this, and then to be able to roll out extensions. This is challenging and develop and significant compared to many of the other schemes which come before. So really need to make sure that we've got the foundations right through this engagement by asking people: are we connecting the right places? Is there a need for mass transit in your community? Do you support the ambition in this space? So all the documentation around mass transit is on the website. I'm just going to very quickly talk to some of the other areas which are published in the connectivity plan now. So walking and cycling is obviously a key part of the connectivity plan. And by 2040, every neighbourhood, village, town, suburban centre needs to have easy access and be able to move around as a pedestrian or cyclist, linked to our wider transport offer. And we really need a step change in our walking and cycling provision. And there's already some schemes coming forwards. I'll talk to that in a moment, but we really need that coherent, comfortable and attractive alternative to a walking and cycling offer. And as part of the connectivity plan, there's more documentation around walking and cycling. From a bus perspective, we've published our bus network reviews, and these set out the core network for the future of bus. Identify existing and new locations for patronage growth, and the infrastructure required to make bus competitive. These are really ambitious proposals, and they also will help to work with the National Bus Strategy, which was published yesterday by central government, which sets out the kind of direction of travel for accessing another £3 billion fund, particularly related to bus. And from a rail perspective, I'll cover this quickly, Rebecca, and then if there's any questions at the end, we can come back with it. The rail vision sets out the ambition for the region moving forward across capacity, connectivity, standards and implementation. It sets the framework. There's a lot more work to go for the rail vision in terms of turning it into a pipeline. It identifies some of those key pan-northern schemes, as well as some of the new stations which need to come forwards, and sets the direction of travel with rail moving forwards. So one second. So just to wrap up then, the last few slides just get into what it means for Calderdale. The plan is set up in terms of the various modes, but it also sets out priorities across 3 programs. So schemes for delivery by 2025, strategic priorities for development by 2025, and options for delivery between 2026 and 2040. So what we want to do in the short term, what are regional priorities, and what do we want to do in the medium to longer term, depending on funding, etc. So what does this mean for Calderdale? What does this mean for Calderdale? So that's going back to the original growth maps and those areas for inclusive growth across West Yorkshire. And from a Calderdale perspective, it has it's one of the areas of the lower accessibility schools for bus, with 65% of addresses in Calderdale within 400 metres of a bus stop served by four buses or more. And there's the greatest immediate opportunity to connect with a number of the big growth sites and reducing the need for all sorts of interchange at Halifax. We've got a number of big schemes coming forward in Halifax, obviously the station gateway, which is out to consultation, as well as the walking and cycling proposals and the access package around Halifax as well. There's more opportunity for walking and cycling schemes to come forward beyond this, as well as on rail, our key priorities being towards kind of the electrification of the rail network and to open up opportunities to transform connectivity through decarbonisation of the local rail network. Also, MPR for stations in Bradford, this provides the opportunity for co-location of Calder Valley and MPR services through Bradford, which will speed up the Calder Valley journey time. So that's something which is key to making the Calder Valley a much quicker route towards Leeds. The slow journey times into Bradford and out of Bradford are kind of a significant bearing on the Calder Valley line, particularly from Hebden Bridge at the moment. Obviously, also there's new stations to come forwards at Helland, as well as new car parking spaces and a number of new stations. And then some of the regional priorities across the piece. I've talked to a number of these already, so we talk around the kind of future phases of City Connect, neighbourhood improvements for walking and cycling, as well as the ambitions to improve the bus offer through strengthening our partnership with bus operators. Some of the rail priorities we've kind of talked about already, and the need to accelerate development of mass transit across West Yorkshire. And going back to where we started around the climate emergency and carbon, there's the need to accelerate the move to alternative fuels, as well as maintaining the road network and also examining the case for highways demand management. So how can we help to reduce the number of car trips on our roads in order to help reduce the carbon impact of transport? So some really big schemes to come forward. And this map just summarises that from a kind of Calderdale perspective of what it could mean in the longer term for the region and that connectivity across the different roads. The final thing I just wanted to do, is just highlight the upcoming webinars. So today we can get into any of these areas as much as we can, but I just wanted to highlight that we do have a number of kind of mode specific webinars coming up over the next week or two, and we really welcome any comments or thoughts at these webinars. You can sign up through the Your Voice website. There's a Eventbrite page, and they'll be hosted via Zoom. We've got 3 with dates confirmed: the rail, walking, cycling and bus. Transport decarbonisation one is going to be in the same. And there was a recent on West Yorkshire transit as well. The links are here. After today's session, these slides will go up onto the website, and you'll also be able to watch the event back as well. And with that, I've talked through many of the slides which I was planning to talk through. I think just coming back to one of the questions which was raised before I started around the carbon audit, I've had some feedback come back in as I was talking from my colleagues. So let me just talk you through the carbon audit bit as well. And it might be that kind of a more detailed session is needed, but it's probably worth noting on the climate, the Transport Committee kind of considered a report around the carbon toolkit in March. And in summary, The consultants have now developed more detailed proposals for the methodology that should be used at each stage of the assurance process. A list of projects which are in scope for the assessment has been supplied. These include all the transport schemes progressing through the assurance framework, not only the ones in delivery, as well as a selection of non-transport schemes. And phase 4 of the carbon work, which is looking at the in-depth assessment and recommendations of carbon mitigation measures, will provide scheme information about the carbon impacts and next steps. And the expectation is that that work will be coming through the reporting system in the summer of this year, date to be confirmed, subject to timings with committee meetings, etc. So hopefully that gives you a bit of update. My understanding is that it is covering, just bring up the message, but I think it's covering the Calderdale SIP schemes, so the A58, A672 corridor, the A646, A6033 corridor, as well as a number of the Calderdale Transport Fund schemes. So hopefully that helps to answer the question which came up at the beginning. And at that, I'll pass back to the chair, if that's okay.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for your presentation. As you said, definitely not short of ambition within it. I am going to pass back to you very shortly, and I don't know if any of your colleagues may wish to chip in. You may note that there's a couple of questions from Myra James in the chat, which I'll allow you to look. But I'm going to first invite a couple of speakers as well. I've got Councillor Audrey Smith, and then I've got Councillor Jenny Lynn, and I'll leave you to read Myra's comments, please, Tom. Okay, Audrey, whenever you want to.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I would just, I've got a couple of comments and a couple of questions. I find the consultation online quite complicated. I find it's quite difficult to sort of easily identify the bits that probably are more relevant to us. I'm okay because I have got a laptop, so I can sort of make things bigger and see it. But I think a lot of people might be trying to do that on their phones. I think it's quite hard. So that's just a comment. Then I've got the usual one about trains stopping at Salvador Bridge station. It appeared on one of the transit maps as a big dot. It's not really a big dot. It's quite often ignored a lot, and Mythenroyd wasn't even mentioned on one of the maps. So I just wonder if there's going to be any progress about getting more trains stopping at Mythenroyd and Salvador Bridge. There's also, we're having the SIP scheme, and we did try very hard to get the SIP to ask First and other buses to link up to the train station at Salvador Bridge, because I just feel that a lot of people that could use the train would do so more easily if they could get a bus right from the train station or right to the train station. I know that the train, it seems to have been agreed that the train will only go halfway up Station Road and then go round rather than the full way up to the station. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it is a bit of a shame. Also in the plan, you've got a note for more parking. I mean, we really need more parking, more cars, and I think that is one of the principles that we're moving away from. We need to charge for parking or try and put people off taking the cars. Also, what about, it's talking about mass transit, but there doesn't seem, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not an expert, but I just wonder about rural transport. It seems a little bit missing about some of these rural routes, or is this not what this is about? And the other question is, there's a lot of mention about walking and cycling. What is the sort of optimum time for walking and cycling between places? Because I think that's quite important, given especially the topography of Calderdale. Thank you very much. It was a really interesting presentation.
Thank you, Audrey. You've probably touched on about 10 different projects there that you're going to ask Tom to speak to. I'm not sure we'll be able to contact all his colleagues in time. Before I invite any other speakers in, I do see you, Councillor Lee, as well. I'll just invite Tom to perhaps comment on that, and maybe Myra's comments that were in the chat as well, please.
Certainly, and I might ask if it's okay, a couple of my colleagues to answer questions as well as soon as we're going through. So hopefully Rebecca might be able to pick up some of the Vale point around Salvador Bridge and Mythenroyd. And I don't know whether Brandon's on the call, wants to talk at all around bus services, or Edwin. But just starting from the top, so the consultation online, we're looking to do a number of shorter polls because we recognise that actually some of the questions can be quite difficult and more difficult to access. But really, the key thing is if you're finding it difficult to respond to it, or any of your constituents are finding it difficult to respond to it, then either send an email into the email address of your thoughts, or take part in the online kind of interactive map and just post comments onto the interactive map direct, rather than actually completing the survey form. It doesn't matter which form it comes back in, as long as we get the comment and the thoughts and the suggestion. The main thing is we capture it rather than necessarily through the survey form. In terms of walking and cycling, I mean that is absolutely at the heart of our plans here, and making sure we've got those walking cycling schemes which work for local communities, and also recognising the topography, particularly of Calderdale, is really important, and kind of those local bus services feeding in to kind of the communities around the areas is also essential. And I wonder on that point, is it worth, Brandon, are you okay just to talk around the Salvador Bridge?
Hello?
You're on mute.
Yes, I think I suppose it's a discussion for the Alliance and for the Combined Authority jointly, really. I think there are a couple of points. The first one is clearly as an objective, we want to discourage car use. So where we can create better interchange, I think that's crucial for this as an objective. And I think secondly, where there's research and feedback from users, and where we can gather intelligence about journeys that are unfulfilled by public transport, then I think that's exactly what the kind of things we've got to be doing. We've got a lot of work, as I'm sure we'll come on to as we recover, and that is going to be through partnership, working closely together to identify travel needs and make sure we fill them. We've got to do that sustainably, of course, but clearly it's going to be in our advantage to make sure we can meet customers' needs. So it's got to be customer driven. So I think I absolutely agree with what you're saying there. Where there's opportunities, we've got to meet them, and we've got to use as much intelligence and customer research as we can to drive that.
And Rebecca, do you want to do an update on where we are around the rail services, Salvador Bridge, Myton Lloyd, etc.?
Yes, I think as part of the Well Vision, what we're hoping to do is anyone in West Yorkshire should be able to travel to anywhere within the region at least twice per hour. So I think 2 trains per hour really is a minimum standard in West Yorkshire. That's what we're hoping to achieve. And obviously for locations that are on the regional network, we would like to see more frequent train service. So the Well Vision, what I'd like to say, the Well Vision really is the first step towards the Well strategy. So what we're hoping to do in coming 12 months, we will publish details or the Well strategy of specific topic in modular form in coming 12 months. So you will be able to see more detail in the local level.
And we've also got Pete Myers on the call as well from Northern. Pete, would you like to say anything about rail services at this point?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I've obviously got a report later on. We'll basically do what we're asked to do by Transport for the North and the DFT as far as patterns go, but we'll also try and go where the market, well, we will go where the market demands. But really what is needed here is a strategy for the Calder Valley, because clearly if this meeting was in Bradford, they would be pushing for a fast service through to Manchester, stopping as fewer places as possible to enable it to be a fast service. And the Calder Valley is only as big as it is big, and it can only take the services it can take. It's already quite full, so it's a difficult balance, to be honest.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you, Audrey, for your questions. I think what is important to know is that with the proposals on mass transit reaching as far as Halifax, that we do not forget the stations and the communities that live beyond Halifax, and that we make sure we're conscious of the communities in the Upper Valley and their connections and what different solutions there might be there. Okay, I've got Councillor Lynn, and then I will come to you, Councillor Lee.
Yes, thanks very much. one of the things that I was interested in really is that in terms of preparation, and I haven't had a chance to look through the evidence. I've been reading the bus strategic bus review and a few other documents ahead of this meeting. But one of the things I wasn't clear about, so it might be in the evidence documents, was the extent to which you'd actually attempted to measure the demand for commuter journeys by talking to key businesses or a representative selection of businesses in the area. I was quite struck a couple of nights ago when I was listening to a piece on the radio about, it was kind of like supposedly about the levelling up agenda. It didn't relate to Calderdale, they'd actually focused on Wakefield. And there was some very, sort of very poignant comments really from a young chap who was having to walk along the side of a motorway at 5:45 in the morning when it was dark, and then cross the said not a dual carriageway in order to get to his workplace because there wasn't a bus service that would take him there. And so I note that in terms of the bus strategy, the bus strategy review, you're actually talking about you're measuring the number of buses from 7 o'clock onwards. Now I've got plenty of neighbours that have to be in work by 7. So I suppose my first question really relates to, I think the key issue about getting rid of a lot of car journeys is making it easier for people to get to work on public transport. So I want to know what have you done to actually check up with some of our key employers about where are their workforce coming from and what might it take to get them to get out of their cars, and also thinking about the hours of travel. My second question actually is a bit more detailed really about Calderdale. And again, I'm particularly thinking about buses. A few years ago when there was talk of major reconfiguration of the hospital services and in fact, possibly requiring people from the Upper Valley in Calderdale to get themselves to Huddersfield for A&E, a big issue, that's not going to happen now I should say, but a big issue was about how long it takes to get, via buses into Halifax and then have to change and so on and so forth. And I'm also very conscious of the fact that people in North Halifax, even looking at what you're proposing in the additional bus services, are still not. I still don't see them necessarily having a direct bus route to Calderdale Royal Infirmary. And there's a perfect route all the way south down my ward, down Queen's Road, from North Halifax that could take them straight to the, if you're prepared to think about a new route there. So I suppose it's just something about have you contacted, what are your thoughts really about, and what research have you done to find out what it would take for the majority of employees to be able to switch to bus transport, and also what are you doing? Because I don't think, to be honest with you, we're talking about a bit of an increase in bus passenger expectations over the next few years, but it doesn't strike me as being massively ambitious. That's all. Thank you.
Chair, would you like us to come back on the response now?
Jump in because there were quite a few in there again. I'm sorry, Stephen. We will get to you.
And Brandon and Edwin, if there's any particular points on the bus which you guys want to come in on those questions as well, feel free to. So the bus network review work has been based on evidence around future travel demand across the region. So looking at where we think the number of trips are going to be in the future, building up from a range of different evidence sources, and looking at where some of the key growth areas are. As part of this, it's obviously really difficult at the moment to predict what's going to happen in the future around COVID. We know at the moment that bus levels of demand have dropped significantly, nowhere near as much as by rail mode. So there's more people travelling by bus now than there were by rail. But we also know that over the last decade, bus patronage has declined significantly. So there's been a real kind of decline in bus patronage across West Yorkshire, but also across England as a whole. And that's something which the National Bus Strategy, which came out yesterday, is looking to address and push more funding into the arena to us to be able to kind of proactively make a better move in our bus space. So the bus network reviews are really based on the evidence of where the key kind of growth areas are and the development sites, and we use a number of different data sources to inform that. There's always more we can do with individual communities and employers in particular areas, and I think particularly as we transition from what are quite high level plans at the moment to bus network review into more kind of specific interventions. So how would we change services on a particular corridor? How do we what time should those services start? What time should they end? Well, actually, that needs to kind of be informed by the kind of stakeholders along that particular corridor and the employers along that individual corridor. So again, it goes back to where I started the presentation around this, is the start of the process. Should we be improving services on these particular corridors? And then the next step is to get into the detail of what that means and what time should services start? What does an integrated network look on those individual corridors? But Brandon, is there anything from a kind of commercial perspective around services and demand which you'd like to pick up on? And Edwin, is there beyond that, is there anything which you'd particularly like to pick up around the infirmary?
Tom, if I can come in first and then Brandon, I think we just had the National Bus Strategy released yesterday to us, and we're still trying to digest the content of that and understand what it really means to us. But we are challenged at the moment working in quite a difficult operating environment, and we've got bus colleagues on the call with us today. We've got Brandon from First, and we've got colleagues from Yorkshire Tiger and Arriva here too. But for the last year, we've been operating in really difficult circumstances, and we're starting now to think about how we build back bus patronage and recover our networks, and how we can move people around safely and give people confidence in those services. The new sort of guidance that's come out with the strategy gives us the opportunity to work together in partnership, and that is our district council partners, the bus operators and ourselves, to help shape that network moving forward in some sort of enhanced partnership framework. And the funding from government is dependent on having a strong partnership established between us all. And I'll hand over to the commercial operators. We've got Brandon there from First, and we've also got colleagues from Arriva, Dwayne's on there. So we might want to get their views as well on this.
Thanks, Edwin, and thanks for the question. Be very, very brief. I think there's three really quick points here. I think the first one is that all our research tells us that through the recovery, we're going to need to continue very strong messaging around the safety and all the measures that we're putting in place to ensure people on buses can continue to travel in comfort as well as safety. And I think those messages are going to be really important as we go forward. I think the second thing, just to reinforce the importance of what was announced yesterday, funding is the key to a lot of these issues, and a strong partnership will leverage as much of that funding as possible, and that's going to be crucial to creating some of these connections. And I think the third one around the alliance and working together is going to be crucial as we go forward as well. And that's got to be built on, as I mentioned earlier, about research and intelligence. So I think as through this process, I think as many of us that can encourage businesses and colleagues to contribute to this consultation, it's going to be richer for us to be able to use that intelligence and data to make the right decisions going forward.
And yeah, just to echo that from Arriva's perspective, support everything that Brandon and Edwin have said. Partnership, yes, is absolutely crucial, and we do have a very good, strong partnership in West Yorkshire with other operators and the combined authority, and we can only build on that. And this report yesterday, which is a lifeline for the bus services locally. It's up to us collectively to make the most of that, and I'm sure we will.
Thank you very much for all your contributions there, and Darren for your contribution in the chat in response to Myra as well. That is noted. It is an ongoing priority, I know, of many people in the area. Councillor Lee, I'm come to you now. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. A number of points, if I may, please. The first one is in Calderdale, we had, excuse me, a very successful cabinet transport group a number of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And that established many of the priorities that Calderdale residents and businesses felt that they had. And indeed, I remember First and Arriva came along and spoke to that group on more than one occasion. And we heard Tom saying earlier about an aspiration for buses to be competitive over the car, which is a laudable objective. But in order to achieve that, we talked about it many times with the operators and with general agreement on that transport working group, that transparency of ticketing and ticket prices themselves are absolutely critical in this. And so on the commercial side, there's lots of work to be done to make it easier for people to buy a ticket, which can take them on a bus to a train station, and from the train station speedily and comfortably to where they want to go. Now, just alluding to what Councillor Lynn just said, it is important that we obtain business priorities. I absolutely agree with Jenny. A number of surveys that I've been involved with over a number of years, 10 years probably, has established that the key for businesses is regional and trans-Pennine services, as opposed particularly to north-south. I mean, north-south are important, but to get the region working is the most important thing. So that's when I come to a couple of specifics. Tom said somewhere in the presentation, a quote, towards electrification of the rail network. So let's be clear, there is a rail network, and the Calder Valley Rail needs electrification. That very transport cabinet group to which I alluded identified that years ago. All of the people that were interested, including Hagrad, Friends of the Earth, you name all of the other people, not just councillors, recognised how very important that Calder Valley line is and the electrification of it is. And in fact, in some ways, that would stop people in Bradford being so worried about it taking an age to stop at one or two stations in Calderdale, because the faster acceleration and better points and better services provided by an electrified railway could meet Bradford's requirements as well as Calderdale's requirements. So that is very first and foremost our priority, to get the Calder Valley line electrification up and running again. That's ready to start. The line's there, it just needs upgrading. But for Wicker, there's a far more important reason for Wicker to electrify that line than maybe our own requirements for Calderdale, because when the Trans-Pennine line from Huddersfield is electrified, we need to complete an alternative route to cater for maintenance, bad weather, breakdowns, dare I say it, occasional accidents stopping the line. And we need it to be a ring main of electrified lines. And Calderdale, when that Trans-Pennine line from Huddersfield is electrified, is the other route that completes that electrified sort of circuit, a bit like the M60 around Manchester. When that additional link was made, it made options for travel and made the whole thing a lot more resilient. So the Calder Valley line is, I don't think we're at towards electrification. We've been there 6 years ago. Everybody's agreed we need electrification, and that should be a very important priority for Calderdale. And the other point is, I don't see any trams or light railway coming out to Calderdale, but I do know in Manchester that tram and its extended routes in Greater Manchester have made an unbelievable difference to the prosperity of Manchester and the outlying districts. And if there's any trams going, we want them coming here as well. So, you know, other than maybe making the buses run more often, or bigger buses or more efficient buses, we've not heard anything other than sort of aspirations here. And I'm saying we want the railway electrified, and we want light trams and light railway on the plan coming here and we want to start doing it as soon as possible. And they should be the priorities that WICA are looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I saw many heads in the room nodding, and many would agree that the electrification of the Calder Valley line has long been and remains a key priority for everybody, I think, in the borough, who's got a keen interest in improving our transport. And as other infrastructure improvements come through, it's one of those key ones that can really benefit almost all the valley. I'll invite, does Tom or one of the other officers want to respond on that? Tom, go ahead.
Just the first thing to say, thank you to Councillor Leaford's comments and suggestions. Absolutely agree that the Calder Valley line electrification is front and centre of the connectivity plan in terms of investments which need to happen. We need to collectively work with government to make sure that happens as soon as possible, as part of the wider measures which we need in the rail offer as well. And also really support his comments makes around light rail and mass transit as well. The plan identifies a series of places where there's the opportunity to connect communities within Calderdale to Bradford and towards Kirklees as well, and the opportunity for a blend of technologies. And the feedback around the types of technologies which you'd like to see come forward are exactly the types of feedback we want through this engagement. We can then feed that into the mix and then use that as part of the evidence base for when we come back at the next stage of the mass transit work, around saying, well, this is the evidence, this is the level of demand, this is the opportunity for individual corridors to start to have that more detailed conversation on what technology should we be looking at on each individual corridor. But from our perspective, understanding the principal kind of point here, yes, support the mass transit vision and the places to connect. Now, what we really want to do is turn this into a light rail, bus, whatever corridor. That's really helpful feedback to us to hear through the engagement. Rebecca, did you want to come in on the rail? Was there anything on the rail side you wanted to come in on?
Yeah, I just want to confirm, in order to decarbonize the railway, I think electrification is quite key. So it will be one of our key strategy, and we support electrification. And obviously, Calderdale line is one of our top priority. It's reflected in all our response to the government, to the National Infrastructure Commission, and the Integrated Rail Plan. So I agree with what the Councillor Steve has said.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I think you've been patiently waiting as well.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's quite a specific question rather than lots and lots. It's about the Queensbury to Illingworth route and how you would propose to route it, really. I think it's quite exciting because it would open up job opportunities, or rather the take-up of job opportunities in Bradford and Halifax and vice versa. So I think it's really quite important the way that you route it from Queensbury to Illingworth. There's Bradshaw, which I suspect maybe you're not going to route it that way, but it does have quite a high population that may well want to travel between the two. It'd be very interesting to know.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to say, again, that's exactly what we need through this engagement, is to hear that type of feedback through this. So really welcome your comments. At the moment, it's really around the point of principle that do you want us to look at mass transit to the north of Halifax and through towards Queensbury and on towards Bradford? That's the type of feedback we want, because we don't want to spend a lot of money on development costs, which is abortive when actually we find out actually you didn't want us to look at doing that. So before we do any substantive development costs, we really want to know, are we connecting the right communities potentially by transit? And if the feedback's yes, then that leads into a whole piece of development work for us to look at and to look at the options and to come back to you with, these are the route options to do that. And there will be a series of route options on each corridor, and there will be compromises on each route option and choices, pros and cons. And as part of the next stage of work, we'll want to come back and have those conversations with you around, well, what are the pros and cons of the different route options? And what are the challenges we face, and kind of coming to a collective view about what is the right thing to do on each individual corridor. So this stage here is really the first stage of the process to check that we're going in the right direction. And if there are things we need to change, then we need to hear that and make sure we kind of have reflected that. and making sure that the evidence backs it up as well. But absolutely, there are some areas, particularly in North Halifax, where there's a real opportunity to open up the transport network in that space to increase accessibility to the local labour market, increase job opportunities, raise productivity levels within the communities, as well as towards the western side of Bradford as well. So it's some really interesting opportunities about what we could do in that space.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was my worry. It's quite difficult now to get from Halifax, from Illingworth to Bradford. You wouldn't do it unless you had a car. So yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, and particularly thank you for mentioning the connection north out of Halifax. I was very excited to see that, and I know a lot of people in North Halifax will be. The lay of the land, and particularly the industry in North Halifax, runs along where the old rail line used to run along. So it's as though the economic infrastructure hasn't really moved on, but it's waiting for some of the transport infrastructure to resume. And I think it's fair to say the past year now, aren't we, has allowed a lot of people to reflect on access to green space. And I think anything that's also opening up spaces as access for leisure, so people can get out of the towns and the cities and go and explore. And obviously going north out of Halifax, you're getting into Bronte country, you're getting into some fantastic spots there. So the more we can open up places like that to people as well, beyond just the economic benefits, I think is really important. Jeff, I see your hand. We'll go to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Really interesting, the sort of broad sweep of what's being said, and I fully endorse what Councillor Lee said about the electrification. That's crucial, and it seems just to get put back all the time. I don't understand why, but there you go. The mass transit system, yes, it's really interesting, but we would surely face some challenges dealing with the local topography of West Yorkshire. So it's not going to be a universal answer for us, but where it is, let's hope that we learn the lessons that other systems have encountered. Let's make sure that we have the best technology in low floor vehicles, rather than the sort of carnage that the Metrolink system has wreaked on the city centre of Manchester. It's an incredibly efficient system, but it's you've got incredible disruption to the physical makeup of the city centre, and you've got a forest of catenary poles and high platforms disrupting public spaces. Whereas if you go on the continent and you find the low floor systems, they're virtually invisible. They really are good quality. Just getting back to the bus patronage and the seemingly inevitable drop in patronage that seems to be taking place, and it feels as if we're not looking at that challenge sufficiently, sort of, if you like, with sufficient sort of innovation. The decisions that people make when they leave the house are to do with the comfort and options that they have. Comfort, status, safety, legibility, all of these are considerations that people take into account when they leave the house and decide whether to pick up their keys or go to a bus stop. And we have to think about the weather that we have. We have to think about how near or far from each other we want to be. And all of these at the moment are legislating in favour of people choosing to use their cars. And we've got to find ways of combating that. And certainly at the moment, it feels as if we're just reproducing the same technology each time and hoping that the answers are different. And then they won't be, until we start creating a bus network where stops are really comfortable with views and with prospects, with live information, with what's on information, other things, easy ticketing, where we've actually got buses that give people a sense of status rather than being crammed into, tin cans. I think we've got an awful lot of ground to make up if we're going to, buses are a mass transit system. They should be. The network is there, but we need to make it better. We need the vehicles to be better. We need them to be low energy, low emissions, and all of these things need to be addressed. I know that's giving you an awful lot of challenges, but anyway, there you go.
Thank you, Jeff, for sharing your comments. Before I come to go on then, Tom. Jump in, and then I do see Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll pick up a couple of the points if that's okay. The first one is learning lessons from other cities, and I think that's a really good point, that we need to make sure that we come forwards with a transport system which does learn the lessons from the Manchesters, the Sheffields, the Nottinghams, and the like. Because there were some really good examples, but there were also some really bad examples of how these technologies have worked. And I think also it's really important that we look beyond the UK as well. I mean, just in Europe, in the last decade, there's been 70 cities have introduced light rail schemes from scratch. So there are many cities across Europe which have done this in the last decade and have introduced new technologies. So the ability to run vehicles now without the overhead wires from end to end, the ability now to have the low floor vehicles, which simply weren't around, or the Manchester decided against back in the 80s, and is forever being held to that challenge. So there is new technologies coming forward in that space, and we're really keen to be at the forefront and learn some of from some of the challenges elsewhere in the UK and beyond. And also just to pick up on the point you made around bus being mass transit, it absolutely is. And as has been said earlier, not all corridors will be a tram solution. There will be different types of technology for different corridors depending on the level of demand. And it's really important that we have the right bus offer as well. So actually, how can we invest in the bus, both in the traditional classic bus services, but also in bus rapid transit technologies on particular corridors to have the right blend in different places. And the final thing to probably just say is on the car point, we are in a really difficult place around post-COVID, aren't we? Because actually everyone is being encouraged to use their car, and it's just made the job even more difficult now to move back to public transport. We've just kind of had a fantastic behaviour change policy from central government to do not use public transport-ish message. And now we really got to, as we recover from COVID, we need to really have a green recovery, because we need people to be not just, there might be fewer trips in the future because people are working from home more, but the trips which do exist need to be much more by sustainable means than by car. And that's our real challenge now. So I think COVID means that we need to try even harder to try and put in the right infrastructure by bus and by alternative means to make sure that people are not using their car.
Thanks, Tom. Definitely a great challenge. I'm hoping that the shake-up that we've had doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see a rush back into the car from everybody, and I think that we will see some very long-lasting changes to commuting, office hours, just general work behaviour and culture, which will present some opportunities alongside presenting some very obvious challenges. I've got our Mayor, Councillor Foster, who was indicated, so I invite you to speak. Please, Dot.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I wanted to raise a couple of points, really. The first, and I'm sure Steph will agree with this one, it seems completely contradictory, really, and contraindicative that the residents of Mixenden do not have a direct bus route to their nearest supermarket at Morrison's in Illingworth, as far as I'm aware, anyway. The 512 certainly doesn't go up there. Is that correct, Steph? I'm pretty sure it is. So yeah, they are a community who are many of whom have significant deprivation, many of whom do not own cars, and are reliant on public transport. And the fact that they cannot get to their nearest supermarket by bus seems ridiculous. unless, of course, there is a bus service, in which case ignore that comment. The second point I wanted to make was about the cleanliness of buses. They are definitely better than they were. I mean, the engine cleanliness, air quality and so on. They are definitely better than they were. But bearing in mind that Leeds are having the very latest buses to tackle their air quality problems, it would be wonderful if we could have the same across Calderdale. I mean, certainly in Salvador Bridge, my ward, we've got significant air quality problems, which are not entirely caused by buses, but certainly the cleaner they are, the better that will be for all of us. So just if you could address those 2 points, please: air quality from bus and the cleanliness of bus engines, and why don't places like Mixenden have a direct bus route to their supermarket? Thank you.
Landon, are you able to help on those questions?
Yeah,
Can I just interrupt? I've just done a quick search. Bus from Illingworth to Mixenden or vice versa, and it's come up with no search results. So no buses.
Yeah, I'll Darren, if I could hand over to you on the Mixenden and Illingworth one, but just on the just before that, just in terms of the investment and the clean air, couple of points. So First Bus, not just in Leeds, across the UK, has made a commitment to ensure that we actually stop buying diesel buses after next year, actually, and that we will have a zero emission fleet by 2035. Now, I know that there's lots for us to do, and both, I think, Dot's comments and Jeff's comments, a lot of very accurate stuff there, and I think we share as operators a lot of those aspirations. And I think it really just highlights the opportunity that we have, not just with this consultation, but with the partnership opportunities that were announced yesterday. I think it's just really worth stressing that there's a large pot of money that is available to areas across the country. And I think it's up to us as operators and the combined authority and the local authority, as well as local partners and communities, to put everything we can behind that leverage to make sure we get as much of that pot as possible. That will accelerate the ability for us to improve public transport, but also for us to get as much of this funding to transfer our fleet from what is generally low emission but not zero emission fleet, and we want to deliver that zero emission fleet as quickly as we can. So there's a real opportunity here with the partnership and the consultation, and we're willing to work hard with partners to make sure we deliver that, as much of that as possible. I'll hand over to Darren in terms of the Mixenden local network query.
Thank you, Brandon. Of course, we do have the 521, 522 and 523 that serve in and around, but it's certainly something I'll take forward to our commercial department, because it does seem quite strange that it doesn't serve across and between. So that's something I will take forward.
Just to build on what Darren has said there as well, there is a tendered service, the 524, run by Yorkshire Tiger, which does run between Mixenden and the back of the Morrisons. So it drops off at Turner Avenue, which is just around the back, and there is a path through to the front entrance of Morrisons.
Thank you.
If you have loads of shopping, you won't want to walk that.
I think there's definitely a challenge, and maybe places like Mixenden, in terms of wider learning, it's one where it looks very near on a map to Illingworth and the services Darren referenced, such as the 521, 522, but it's pretty much a sheer cliff face in terms of the topography to get from one to the other. So I think something always we need to think about when we're looking at flat 2D maps. I think Tom may have had some further response, but I think there's definitely something within there about remembering the importance of some social benefits as well as just economic benefits, where we are able to factor those in, such as access to supermarkets. I think the last year has shown us how we need to make sure that communities are resilient, and have access to utilities such as this. Tom, I'll come to you, and then I do see Craig Craig Whitaker MP has got his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to highlight the national bus strategy again, which is discussed earlier. I'll put a link to where it is in the chat so everyone can download it, and particularly to point to the funding which it provides around delivery of zero emission and low carbon buses. So obviously a number of buses have been upgraded to within Leeds and broader, but there's more we can do in that space. And I think now that the funding is starting to become available through the National Bus Strategy, that opens up new opportunities about how we can further decarbonise the bus system moving forward with the vehicles within the network. So the ray of hope is that the National Bus Strategy helps organisations, including Arriva and First and others, to further decarbonise their bus fleets.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Craig, for attending. I see that you are you're next if you wish to speak.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everybody for the invite today. It's been incredibly interesting, to say the least. I do have to go very, very shortly. In fact, I should have gone about 10 minutes ago, but I just wanted to drop a couple of things and follow up from what Jenny Lynn was saying earlier, and that's around the workplace. I mean, like most elected officials, locally, we spend a lot of time visiting businesses, and it never ceases to amaze me how many people in the Calder Valley work in the Calder Valley but don't live in the Calder Valley. And we have a lot of high-end, highly skilled jobs, particularly in manufacturing, where people commute from outside. So the challenge, I suppose, is how are we consulting those really small SMEs that employ people from outside the valley and getting their input in how we get people out of cars. Obviously, if you live in Leeds and Manchester, the majority of people get on the train because we're very lucky that we do have the Calder Valley line. So whether you're in Brighouse or in Todman and Hebden Bridge, you do tend to use the train, but it's those other smaller commutes. The other thing that Jenny mentioned was the hospital reconfiguration. And she was absolutely right. The reconfiguration isn't as it was initially intended. But what's happened is it's flipped. So whilst it's much more beneficial for us in Calderdale, it's not particularly beneficial for somebody who lives in somewhere like Home Firth or the other side of Kirklees, who have to come to Calderdale to use our hospital facilities. So I suppose my question and thought process, and I don't know the answers to these questions I'm posing, by the way. I'm genuinely don't have the answers. But how is it, if we're wanting people to use a mass transport system, and particularly when we've got issues like the hospital, people coming from further afield to use our facilities here in Calderdale, how do we get them out of the car to do that? Because I think that's incredibly important. Just one other thing I want to mention about that is we always argued when the situation was reversed in the hospital reconfiguration, how does Mrs. Smith, who's 82, who lives in Todmorden, get to Huddersfield to go and see Mr. Smith, who's gone into hospital? Well, the answer was they couldn't, and we're going back 5-10 years ago. And the reality is the same still applies for Mrs. Smith, who lives in Home Firth. But nothing seems to have been done there. So I just wondered, how much of that kind of thought process are we putting into A, getting people out of cars, and B, making those types of connectivity much more poignant to people's lives? Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Craig. Much appreciate you coming. Tom?
Thank you for the questions, and I'll start. And if others from the Combined Authority or from the bus authorities want to help answer the questions as well, that's welcome. But in terms of the engagement, well, obviously we would normally do the engagement differently, but being in COVID and all being at home, we're having to do much of the engagement around the connectivity plan and the bus plans via social media and other online forums. So we've been holding a series of webinars. We're doing a number of events with businesses. Business groups through the business communications group, which we have at the Combined Authority, as well as the Chamber and the various groups that the Chamber holds as well as pushing it out to all of the businesses which we work with via our trade and investment groups, via our other kind of SME groups as well, of which there's quite a number given the engagements which we we do with the LEP and its partners as well. So we're trying to push it out to as many as we can, but we really welcome your help. So if there's more which we can do, or organisations you think we should be talking about, either forward the engagement details direct to them, or let us know and we'll make contact. So if there's particular organisation stakeholders you think we should be talking to around the connectivity plan, which you're not sure whether we've engaged with or not, then make sure that we know, and we will make sure we get in contact with them. How we're going to get people out of the car and using bus, rail, mass transit is a cracking question, and is one which for me is all around integration, integration and affordability. So it's about making it easy for people to use public transport. So Mrs. Miggins, who lives wherever, is able to have a single product, a single ticket, which can use across the modes, and you can turn up and go and travel from their location to where they want to get to. And it's about having a public transport system which allows them to do that. So it's not just about mass transit or bus, it's about how do you create that integration between the modes and making sure that the public transport offer is competitive in terms of journey time and in terms of price, and making it as easy as possible for people to use. The reality of doing that is difficult and costs money. So it requires funding to allow us to do that. And that's why the funding opportunities through the £4.2 billion intracity transport fund is so important. The more we can bring in for West Yorkshire, the more we'll be able to deliver some of the interventions which we're talking about in the connectivity plan at an earlier date. So it's really important that we make the case for that funding for West Yorkshire as early as possible. But how do we get people out of car? Well, it's about integration, it's around affordability, it's around having that high quality alternative to the car and making it as easy as possible. The connectivity plan does also talk about kind of the highways demand management measures, which we might want to put in place as well. It doesn't go into what the conclusion of those is, but it starts to talk around, well, it's not just about providing kind of the sustainable alternative. It's about also looking at how do we reduce the number of car trips and what policies we need to look at to reduce car trips. And there's things which can be done locally, there's things which can be done regionally, and there's things which can be done nationally around the space of highway demand management. And what we're proposing is we start to explore that space about what should we be doing, what should be the policy response to reduce the number of car trips within West Yorkshire. But if you're to reduce the number of car trips, you also need to provide the quality alternative, don't you? You need to give people that choice. So for me, it's about having that alternative choice out there as well. Is there other points, Edwin or Rebecca first? Is there anything else that you'd like to say in response to Craig's comments?
I was going to, Tom, if I can come in, I just wanted to mention it's really important for bus services that we can provide a reliable network and provide attractive journey times. And that's one of the key determinants in terms of people choosing to use public transport or not use public transport. It's the reliability and the journey time. So anything we can do with our district partners to improve journey time reliability for bus services and journey time performance has got to be positive. And I'll bring in Brand now from first.
Yeah, just absolutely agree with that. In terms of Craig's question about modal shift, I think this word trust is really important. Communities have got to have trust in, and the reliability of the service is crucial to that. So first of all, it's got to be a reliable network. We've got to deliver it, and then we've got to communicate it and promote it. And that's ultimately what the key is to driving that modal shift and that quality. So very, very welcoming news around the bus strategy again I refer to, and the opportunity there for operators and local authorities to work together and put those bus priorities in where they're needed.
Thank you everyone for your responses on that question. Yeah, thanks for coming, Craig. I will hand over to Jeff, who has got another question.
Yeah, sorry, there's supplementary really. Just we're thinking about the future, but we also need to look at how effectively our existing sort of network works. I'm thinking at the moment, for instance, of some of the railway stations. Take Salvador Bridge, for example, is quite a long way from the town centre, and at the moment, the sort of the connection is Station Road, which is a very long walk, and yet you could bridge across the river which and stay at high level and get to the platform without actually having to drop down or have any steps. And so you'd have a fully accessible connection. Todmorden, for example, yes, they're putting lifts into the station, but actually getting up the rise or station approach is enormously challenging. The railway station is actually probably the least accessible part of the whole of the town, and yet so we need to find different ways of making the station not only accessible but visible. Brighouse, you feel like you're miles away from the town. You come out of the railway station, where is the town? And literally, if you're in the town, where is the railway station? And it's a pretty it's a pretty tired experience when you arrive there. You feel like God, I'd buy a Toyota Starlet and do it rather than go on the train. But so competing with somebody in their Beamer is ridiculous. So we need to change not just the reliability and cost of mass transit, but its image. I stress this every time I'm given an opportunity. That give us a chance to actually show people that mass transit can be comfortable and it can be dignified and it can and we can deal with it in a way that actually is going to attract car users, because the people who have fewest choices are the most likely customers that we're attracting at the moment. The ones that we need to attract are the ones who still have choices, who still have the choice to get in the car, because those are the toughest people to attract. But those are the ones where we're going to get significant numbers if we can find a package that will deal with modal shift.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm conscious of time. I wanted to let the discussion go on as long as we can. As Stephen said, we've probably not had a space amongst councillors where we've had as many conversations to discuss transport related matters. So it has been nice for us to be able to have some of that discussion here, where we've probably brought up some local issues, but I think Tom's probably been able to see how they can relate into the grander strategy that I know he's working on. So I'll invite officers to make any sort of closing statements on that. I noticed that Anthony Ray feels his question needs further answering, as he mentioned in the chat. So I would ask if someone would be able to take that away to the relevant bodies, and it's a bit further up in the chat. It was relating to the carbon audits, but I think it's best if you take that one away and come back with something in writing. Perhaps might be the best case if you don't have it all to hand. But are there any closing comments on your workshop? Because we do have a little bit left on the agenda of other items, and I will try and allow especially the operators to give all their updates before we finish. Okay, Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Just thanks for the invitation to mention one more thing. I do think there's the problem with using railways wherever they are is the last mile of connectivity of a journey. And all along our Calder Valley line, essentially you've got people living some distance away from the stations and they have to get there. And, the topography is challenging. So what we need to do with respect to people that have to get in a car if they live on the top somewhere to get down to Mythen Road station is we have to do some work on the strategies for charging for parking. Because, and as somebody mentioned Salvador Bridge before, it's a great example. Because if you go to Salvador Bridge after about 7:30, 7:45, there are no parking places there. And, and the spaces are taken up all day. And we want to make the railways available for all people that want to go into Leeds from Salvador Bridge at 11 in the morning with the kids. And if you can't get that last connectivity, it all fails. And it's all very well having free parking, but if it's then absolutely blocking out other users all day, then there's a problem, and we have to be cleverer than we are at present. And you can look at stations all the way along the line, and that is a big problem. And so, you know, whilst on the one hand, we want to make the railway attractive to all, but if because of the way Calderdale is structured, people often have to go in a car to the railway station, then you've got a problem, and we need to sort it out with some charging mechanism or some scheme that allows other people to get on the train during the course of the day before all the commuters come back at 6 or 7 o'clock and take their cars home. So I do think that's an important one, Dan, to just put in the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And I do remember you making suggestions around this before, and you're always a strong voice for business, and good to be one for people beating the businessman to get in all the spots, because that is exactly the situation in Salvador Bridge as in a number of places. Tom, did you want to come back on that and then wrap up on anything else you might have?
Yeah, in terms of coming back, just to say, we do have a number of webinars coming up, and I really would encourage everyone to take part in those specific webinars. So there's a rail one, a bus one, walking and cycling one, and obviously we've got into those issues a bit today, but those webinars are available to all. They'll be open to the public, they'll be recorded, but we really would, if there's particular issues we haven't yet managed to get into enough, really do take a look at those, and I'll post the link to them in the chat function as well, so you can sign up right away if you want to. And also, I just really wanted to say thank you to all of the comments which come out. I feel like it's been a really helpful conversation today. And I kind of would welcome any of those comments which you've made today to come through to us on email or on kind of complete the survey form, or do have a look at the interactive map. So really welcome all the comments that you guys have made today on the call. And as I said right at the beginning, this is the starting point, not the end. So if we need to make changes, we need to reflect on that for the engagement. Absolutely, we'll listen and see where we go from here. So thank you very much. Is really well back up by saying.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for everyone who has been able to attend additionally to the committee today. And I know that many other councillors would have wanted to be here, and just due to the timing and nobody ever being able to be available all at the same time, they weren't able to be here. But I know colleagues will pass on the information so that they are aware, and hopefully we'll be able to feed into the survey at their own time. Now, we usually do aim to finish for about 4 o'clock, and I think that because other people may have commitments, we should still aim to do that. But we do have a few items left on the agenda. Now, I know some people may wish to leave now, but if you wish to stay to the end of the meeting, we will be going through the information report and then the operator updates. So thank you for the workshop. People are free to choose as they wish. Now, there does say chair's update on there, but for brevity, I think we've discussed so many of the issues that I might have raised around bus strategy and other matters that I presumed may well come up at some point. I suggest that we move straight forward onto the information report. I'll ask Edwin if there's anything particular he wants to raise from it, and then I would like to go straight to the service operators to provide their updates.
Thank you, Councillor Sutherland. There's nothing really I want to raise up at it, apart from that the service changes that we brought in the autumn of last year seem to have been successful. So we're pleased with how those bedded in. We might get some feedback from the operators on that, and we're particularly pleased with the link between Halifax and Keighley and being able to restore that.
As a North Halifax resident, and so was I, and I remember when we lost that, I lived out in the rural bit between Halifax and Keighley, and it was a bit of a nightmare, to say the least, as a young teen, to be suddenly cut out of a lot of the areas I might have wanted to visit. So that is a good piece of news. Are there any questions on the information report, members? If not, I will go straight to the operator updates. I think that's probably the most important item we've got left, and then any questions that might come from that. Brandon, I see you and Darren up first, so I'm happy for you guys to go.
Yeah, I'll hand over to Darren if that's okay on this one.
Thank you, Brandon. Really, I suppose for us, communications continue to follow the government guidance and we're ensuring that our services remain safe and customers can travel with confidence. I think also our service levels have adapted in line with DfT guidance and support. Most recently, last week, we had some good feedback regarding passenger experiences. And our passenger levels currently are at approximately 45% of the expected normal levels.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Darren. Dwayne, there you go, you popped up like magic.
Yes, so similar story for ourselves. So in Calderdale, we operate predominantly tendered services on behalf of the local authority. As a result of that, we've been in discussions with them and maintained full service levels across the district. We are, of course, still running with reduced capacity because of social distancing, and that has led to a number of additional trips that we've put onto the network to support the schools, in particular, going back on the 8th of March. I suppose a little bit of good news, sort of tying into Edwin's comments previously about the new service between Halifax and Keighley. That service has proved very popular, so much so that we are bringing larger single deckers into the operation in order to run that service, so that we can ensure that we maintain social distancing. So you'll see some larger vehicles on the roads from us in due course. Looking forward to welcoming customers back on board, and for now we'll continue to provide for those essential journeys.
Thank you, Dwayne. And as you may have noticed, Edwin's put in one of the major challenges that I don't think we should all get into now, but the gap of time whilst social distancing is still in place, but shops have started to open, is going to be a very tricky couple of months for all involved. But I know that best minds are being put to that and challenging the DfT to get some guidance on where to go. Pete, I'll come to you now. Thank you. If you've got an update for us.
Jolly good. Yes, 1 or 2. It's been a busy old time. We're now on about our 8th timetable, which is operating well, and performance remains good. In fact, excellent, which is good. This timetable is likely to last through till May the 16th, which is when our summer timetable comes in, and that will see a significant upturn on what we currently provide. Clearly, that gives us a gap between the 12th when non-essential retail reopens and the 16th when our timetable uploads. We're really in a difficult position here, because one of the biggest issues to hit the rail industry, and certain northernmost of all, is that we haven't been able to train any new drivers for much of last year because of social isolation. So we've got this huge training backlog. And one thing we're using this reduced timetable for, we're currently running, is to get that backlog down before the summer starts and we start going backwards again. And that is important. Equally, numbers travelling for the rail considerably lower than buses. We're currently sitting between 15 and 19% of our pre-COVID numbers, and that's right across the piece. But significantly, what is missing, and well, everything's missing at the moment, but what is missing and was missing all last year, right through the summer, is the traditional peaks, which just no longer exist. At least not at the moment. So we have to take cognizance of that. Best research, and a lot of research has been done, will show us getting back to about 30% of pre-COVID levels by about the end of May. So that does dovetail nicely with the new timetable starting, but that is important. We continue to up our cleaning dramatically, and as with our bus colleagues, the secret here is to welcome people back once this is all over, and that is the biggest thing at the moment. And our messaging and our offers are all ready to go when the government say we can go, and we encourage people back to the railway. One thing's for sure, what seems to be for sure, is what we're expecting this year with people staying at home is a big upturn in the leisure market. So our summer timetable, it has to be designed to meet that. So we need to maintain those services to through the Dales and along the coast to ensure people can get to where they need to and want to go to this summer. Done a bit of work with schools. Schools came back on the 8th. We do carry a lot of school children. On the Calder Valley, they're incidental flows. They're not massive, but in some places they are. And thanks to West Yorkshire Combined Authority, they've been terrific helping us here, because we've put buses on to supplement trains where needed. But on Calder Valley, that hasn't been necessary. I told you the numbers travelling, they remain what they are. It's as the weather gets nicer, the numbers start to increase, even though the rules haven't changed dramatically, but they're still very, very low.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you for your report. And I do share our hope for the optimism that we might have a summer where we're seeing a lot of British holidays and people using public transport to enjoy those, whether it's a weekend in the Dales or a trip to the seaside. I noticed John had a question in the chat, which I think you following that up to ask John, because I was going to ask you which service it was actually, because I wasn't sure which operator on that one.
It's the service from Brighouse to Murfield, which is the last remaining bit of the ex-service from Halifax to Wakefield, which has been cut back and cut back. The Brighouse to Murfield service was withdrawn in January, I think it was, fairly recently anyway. I'm hoping that when things get better, that will be restored. It's been replaced by an Arriva service from Huddersfield to Murfield to Heckmondwike and Cleckheaton. But that's not of much consolation to people wanting to go between Brighouse and Murfield.
Thank you. I don't know if Edwin or one of the operators can give us a response on whether that is temporary.
I can come in briefly, Councillor. We are looking about how we can restore that link or replace that link once sort of restrictions come off later in the summer. I haven't got any firm plans that I can sort of state at the meeting today.
Well, thank you. I'll be able to tell people that that's the situation, which is.
So we are aware it's missing and we are looking at it.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your updates. And I don't see anybody else indicating, and we have amazingly managed to get this wrapped up just before 4 o'clock. And I've got an evening meeting as well, so this is my gap for having some dinner, and I'm sure everyone else has got all the things that they're going to want to do. But I think we've had a very interesting and productive meeting, definitely very well attended, and we've been able to widen the reach there to particularly linking with some of the councillors so they're aware of our work. So thank you everyone for attending, particularly all those who reported and presented at the meeting and asked questions. And I look forward to seeing you next time. And I wasn't sure whether we had a date booked in, Ben, or whether we were to circulate one.
Yeah, we're currently planning the next meeting cycles. I will circulate it shortly.
TBC. Okay, that sounds good. All right, well, I look forward to seeing you then. I don't know quite what the format will be, but we will see you soon. Okay. Take care. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye all.
All right.